everybody here. Like they say, rural India is an opportunity that no company in this room perhaps can afford to miss. There's a market out there, and there's also a whole lot of moolah to make. It is not without a reason that each one of us wants to chase rural India. If you just look at figures, 2010 to 2012, rural India spent about $69 billion versus urban India, which spent about $55 billion. So you know a reason why we're doing this panel discussion today. The big question, though, is that there is a market out there, but what are the challenges? What are the enablers? What do companies have to do to get this right? And that's perhaps the topic that we will debate. May I now request my eminent panel to join me right here on the stage. We begin with Mr. Ashwini Hiran, the Chief Operating Officer of Consumer Products Division at Tata Chemicals. Mr. George Angelo, Executive Director at Dabur. Mr. Sanjeev Goyal, the Senior Vice President Marketing at Mahindra & Mahindra. Mr. Sunil Sood, the COO of Vodafone India. And of course, Sanjay Dabur of Accenture. The operative word of this discussion is profitably selling to rural India. There's a market out there, but how is it that you boost your bottom line while you cater to that market? Ashwini, let's begin with you. You're in a business which is as urban focused as it can be rural focused. The question, though, is that there are still challenges that rural India poses before companies like yourselves. Let's begin and talk about the challenges per se.
In our company, we have about 3 verticals, if you look at, and one of the verticals that talks about is the consumer business, which has challenges of both urban and rural. We also have the expertise of being in the agri-business, where we actually sell only in the rural areas for the rural masses, and therefore we have the experience of that selling, and then how do we leverage that into this business is the critical part of it. So as we were discussing, that reaching to rural areas would be as difficult as in some urban areas. So that's one. Second is, having reached there, how do you really acquire the customer? And then having acquired the customer, how do you really retain the customer with you? So I think each one of us, this comes with a positive and also a condition where you need to really take it forward.
That's a fair point indeed, and unlike the urban consumer, he's not as flippant. He doesn't switch channels and he doesn't switch his service provider. But let me just ask you, George, what do you think is perhaps the biggest challenge that you deal with?
I think when we looked at the rural market, at the end of the day, the biggest challenge is rural markets are huge, scattered, fragmented, and I would say very thinly populated. 96% of the villages in India are less than 5,000 in population. But the interesting part is, just 9% of that is about 38% of the population, where 40% plus of the rural wealth is located. So one needs to be sensible about one is approaching the marketplace. And the real challenge from an FMCG perspective is to ensure that your last mile connectivity, as connectivity improves, you are able to reach your products into the hinterland. Also, the further challenge from a sales system perspective is to actually have a talent pool from where you can recruit and sustain in the rural markets. And the last piece of information today, challenge really for the company is, when you are investing in these markets which are so distant, you need to have information flow really coming back to you, so you are able to either calibrate your investments or try and focus investments around areas which seem to be really paying you back.
Fair point indeed, but I think his part on the last mile connectivity brings me to you, and there can't be a better cue to get to Vodafone than that. What is your challenge? People here are now talking about roti, kapda, makan and a SIM card. So you're not finding it difficult to get to a market or to find a market. What is the challenge for you then?
Now, when I go to the village level, first of all, there's no building. There's no multi-story. Everything is on the ground floor. So I have to put a 40-meter to 60-meter tower built of steel in the Khet, in the village. You can imagine the difference that costs. We were forced to actually go to our competitors and share towers, because that was the only way and the only model that actually we found would work. So that was the first part. The second is the access, distribution. So here we have the network, we are beaming in. Now how do we get the customers? So we used 2 things. Number one, like he did, he employed a local son of the soil. And then we looked at how would he cover this beat at the cheapest cost possible, and what is the kind of feed that we want.
You spoke about the genesis of Indus Towers. If I was doing a news show, I would have asked you the monetization, but I'll spare you the detail there.
But, majority of our population today is rural, so they're paying us back.
Actually, that's a stunning statistic. You want to share it with our audience here? I think 79 million?
77 million of our customers are today rural, and this is December statistics. So, we've added a few since then. But on a month-on-month basis, 65% of the new customers we get are actually from the rural belt.
I'm going to speak to you because, Sanjeev, auto is still discretionary spend, so to say, and it is still seen as a more affluent purchase that a rural India will make. What are the challenges and how different are they from the ones we've discussed right now?
Well, actually, in my case, it's slightly different. I don't have the privilege like my other friends. They do have an urban market, but in the case of Mahindra Tractors, there's no urban market at all. Adoption is relatively slow in rural India, and the marketeer has to really make all kinds of effort, not only to reach, but also to make the consumer adapt to mechanization or new technologies. And it can be a slow and painful process. So I think it's very important for marketeers to have heart and sweat it out there so that, adoption happens. The other challenge that we face is that our dealer network. Now, it was one thing to have a dealer who's been with you for nearly 30 years now, and it's totally another to have his second generation being interested in the same business. Because once the dealer makes money, his family, his own aspirations go up, and his children's aspirations surely go up. Which leads to the third point that we have, in our business, which is that the younger generation is not interested in farming. So these are the fundamental challenges that I think rural India faces.
I'm going to start with you on this round of discussion. There were some of us who spoke about retention. In your case, I know it's not a very relevant thing, but how do you make sure that his second purchase will also be a Mahindra? Or how tough is it to do the after sales and services which are considered imperative in an urban market? Are they as imperative in rural as well?
Yes, absolutely. I would say so. Because you see, for all the same reasons of reach and cost, I suppose service becomes the key differentiator in rural India. Because when the farmer comes back to you with a problem, and it's a money-making machine for him, and if you don't set it right within the time frame, it means a certain revenue loss for him. So every hour actually ends up being a very expensive proposition from a farmer's perspective. So to that extent, service becomes a very key differentiator in rural India, and retention of consumers, service plays a very vital role, so to speak.
The study seems to say that once on board, the consumers stay more with you in rural India than they do in urban India. Is that true for a telecom company as well?
Absolutely. So, whatever attributes your product has, there's one more aspect which becomes very, very important. It's called trust. Okay, that's a very important part, which especially in the rural belt in India, we need it. Because these are the guys who've been exploited many times. Guys have come and exploited them and run away. So they look at two things. Are you in it for the long term? Are you in it for the long haul? Do you have any permanence there? And we try to do that.
Sanjay, I just want to come to you before I go to others. On this retention bit, the study says that reach, acquisition and retention is really the key challenges. Should one presume here that retention is really the key to cracking that market? I mean, you can have customers come and leave your network, so to say, but if they're not going to retain, you cannot ever crack that market.
I think it starts with the acquisition. So, just the sentiment around the panel is the rural customer is very loyal actually, because they're used to using a particular product or service, and there is groupthink. The minute you break in and you prove the value of that particular product or service, the word of mouth is so strong that you will retain that particular customer. But breaking in is difficult because you have to change the earlier groupthink. So I think it starts with the acquisition, but then you've got to work even harder to make sure that your trust remains and you keep that groupthink there. Because there it is all about collective risk and collective sort of
There must be
pain.
something right if everybody is
Exactly.
doing it.
Why
Even if it's
reinvent
wrong.
the wheel?
Yes.
It's everybody is using this product or service.
Right.
It's working well, so let's stay with it. So I think it starts with the acquisition, and then you work on the retention.
I want to ask you specifically, do you believe at one level the challenge is, what is a bigger challenge? Profitability or the ability to scale up in rural India?
I think it's both. If you look at, unless you really scale up, you're not able to be profitable. But then there has to be a patience period, there has to be a gestation period. And what one would look at is that these are markets where you need to invest, and maybe over a period of 5 to 7 years, they'll pay you in the long term. So one shouldn't see as, an expense item on the balance sheet, but see how you're really investing and then moving the brand forward. And when we talk of, let's say, customer acquisition, one has to be clear that the customer is going to be with you for almost lifetime. Both are important. It's a question of what comes first. Investment will come first, and then.
Sure enough, both profitability and scalability are important.
Yeah.
But George, just to ask you this question, there was this whole myth, especially for companies like yourselves, if you're selling a 100 milliliter shampoo in rural India, you can, in urban India, you can put a sachet and it's going to sell like hotcakes. That doesn't seem to be true anymore. You've got to have, rural India perhaps is asking for customization more than ever before, and that is where the whole innovative business model comes into play, doesn't it?
Sanjay spoke earlier about a collective mindset in rural. So even when you have, let's say, a familiar brand, we have been in existence over 127 years, Dabur India. Let's take one of our popular brands like Lal Don Manjan. When we went into the market, we understood that there are a large section of people who are not using any dentifrice product. Media dark. If you were to just look at some of the media opportunities even, the television penetration in rural parts of some of the northeastern Indian countries are just about 11%. So even if you have a brand, there's no way of talking to them. The second aspect was, if you were to actually convert them from a existing product usage into something else, you need to give them a very strong reason why. Because at the end of the day, in a rural market, there is a very strong quality value functionality mindset. Right. So they value functionality much more than all the frills that you can talk about. True. And in a 30-second commercial on a mass media, you can never communicate some of these aspects related to your brand.
Sanjeev, just to take up the next part of the thread of the discussion with you, let's just talk about partnerships. Let's just talk about channels, selection and management of those channels. Is that something that is really key to success when you're looking at big profits in rural India?
I would say absolutely, because you see, when you talk about rural India, you really are not so close to the end consumer. And it is the channel that bridges the gap. And the kind of faith that the customer has with the front face, which is the channel, is immense. So your dependence on the channel is far, far higher for the same reasons of reach that we were just now discussing. That a brand has to ride on a good channel, and hence channel management, channel retention, and channel motivation are the key differentiators when it comes to rural India. They are a ticket to success for any brand which is entering or which is sustaining itself in rural India.
Ashwini, you agree with that, the whole channel management and selection bit?
Of course, and I would like to add that one is that we always go through a traditional channel of wholesale, retail, and then final consumer. One also would need to look at concurrent channels, like, whether we should go through self-help groups, whether we should go through. And therefore, it's not that just the traditional channel one would have to look at. It's also, channels are now, getting into cross categories stocking, and therefore today even in urban areas you see the medical store keeping cosmetics, and similar things are happening in rural areas also. And therefore one will, well, it's early days, but one will have to look at that. Yes, there is a traditional channel which is very important for us to be loyal. At the same time, considering that we have less number of outlets and more number of people and villages to be serviced, we'll need to have a heterogeneity of channels coming back into multiple product storage. So I would feel that both are important.
How crucial is the role of technology to your success, to your profitability, to your ability to scale up?
See, when we looked at the entire canvas, we figured out that the task is extremely large. And the brief to me was that you need to scale up, but scale up profitably. Now, this brought technology, a requirement of technology to be used. So we had a look at the entire scheme of things in rural and identified that about 10 states in this country contributed to 72% of the rural potential. So we use this GIS maps, integrated economic information, the district level FMCG market size, the per capita sale of that surrounding districts or the larger markets where we have a footprint, what is our per capita sale over there. The other indicators in terms of accessibility, which is about a road network being there, commercial establishments being there. The moment we started putting this together using the GIS maps, it emerged that we could actually construct hubs and spokes across this terrain in a very focused manner. Now, having set that up, the next piece was about setting up a distribution network itself. The problem was really about sustaining a network, which means when you establish a network, you had to have visibility whether are we able to sustain our footprint. Because at the end of the day, when you're setting up a very large field force in a completely distant terrain, one of the biggest challenges really is, are these guys really existing? Are they working? The other aspect really, apart from setting up the distribution channel, controlling it, having control on the people out there, was also reverse on the company, because now the front-end distribution system, the distributors, the stockists who are working with us, had transparency about their relationship with the company, putting pressure back onto the company in terms of improving our own processes of customer service. So it was really about a comprehensive thing, starting with acquisition, coming back onto customer service, feeding back over there.
If I want to ask you, technology is really the enabler here, isn't it?
Yes, it is. It is. So, there are lots of things. So he mentioned aid to Salesforce, or Salesforce automation tool is what we call that, etc. But I won't touch on his aspects. There are other aspects. You see, take the rural cycle. What do? There are a lot of daily wage earners there. There's the farming community which has seasonal money. Okay, so money is not on an even pattern like it has in the urban state. Like in the urban, salary day, everybody wants to sell in the first week of the month, etc., etc. There, it's very different. So there may be lots of little purchases, but lots of them, because there's volume there. Okay, there's numbers there, and it's huge numbers. Let's understand the majority of Indians, 68% of them live there, right? So technology is one thing which can, at a low cost, enable that lots of those low volumes to total up to a big volume. So because really speaking, you're getting high volume, but a little low, maybe a little lower margin, because thanks to cost to serve or reach, etc., the points that they made being maybe a little higher, you may make a little lower margin, but you're getting a lot more volume from that. And that's what benefits you overall in terms of the money you make. Also, I'll give you an example of what happened to us and how we learned the hard way. Initially, when we put those mini stores, the Vodafone mini stores or Lal Dukans in the villages, so like here, we all gave them for customer service one PC or a laptop to operate on. And then we found that nothing's happening, because half the time, 12 hours, the electricity is gone. So he said, either you give me a battery pack to enable it to work 24 hours, otherwise this laptop is a waste, because 12 ghante to yahan bijli aati nahi hai. And that's a very typical village. So we had to then enable everything on SMS, and that's what we did. We actually tested it out in Pune city. We blacked out Pune city for all our stores. We just killed the computers. And we enabled every action, whichever we do at our service levels, on a SMS. Okay? And that's the product we actually give the villages. So on the SMS basis, exactly hitting a server, like he said, he enables all kinds of activation. You want roaming, you don't want roaming, you want this product, don't want this product, whatever you want. All on the basis of an SMS. The only thing he couldn't look at is, things like your usage, and, there are not that many postpaid users. But for that, we had a 2-3 man helpline at the back end to support him and support all these front end retailers, which are, or Vodafone Lal Dukan shop guys, which are mini store guys, which are there. So at a low cost, we enabled it all. I'm just saying. So that's what you have to use technology to, but at a low cost, ensure that it's at a low cost to provide the service.
There is no escaping technologies there in this world today. I want to ask you a final question, Sanjay, and that's really on, the top management, the organizations buy-in, they're embracing the whole rural foray, so to say. They're embracing the whole idea that rural Indian business can be extremely profitable. That's where the mullah, like I said, initially is. 200 companies surveyed. How crucial is the top management buy-in, you think? And is it happening at a far higher speed? And do you think it is higher for masters in your metrics than for the new entrants or the voyagers, so to say?
Yeah, no, so there clearly is this thing about being present in the rural market today. And there are a couple of factors for it. The first is just the economic situation. I guess, you can't continue to be focused only on urban markets when the spending in rural markets is growing faster than the urban markets as a percentage, albeit it's over a lower base. But the fact that it's growing, people are taking notice. Second, I think these are difficult times. So you're looking for new avenues for growth. And what do? You look at new segments and you start servicing those new segments. So I think it's imperative. All top management is today thinking about rural markets. To your second question about correlation between the masters and their profitability, we have attempted that particular analysis. What we don't have is enough data at this point in time to conclusively say that yes, all the masters are performing in a similar fashion and therefore they are actually making enough money. But a large part of the sample is actually over-delivering compared with the rest of the competitors in their segments where they are also focused in the rural markets. There are outliers, but we need a larger data set to be able to conclude it conclusively.
Sure enough, and I think when we meet next, we will have that larger data and more companies will be catering to rural India. Vineet, can you please come on stage for the vote of thanks, please?
A big thank you to each of the panelists for sharing their thoughts and insights with us. And thank you, Supriya, for helping us navigate this journey. Dear audience, thank you for this wonderful evening. Thank you for coming over and actively participating in this event.